So now we have the next topic of discussion, and I have the pleasure of introducing two stalwarts. One is Pankaj Goel, and Pankaj, I have known him from the time he started Crestech, and now as part of the Opkey team. He is the CEO for Opkey, a veteran in the industry, a very strong technocrat, an IIT BHU alumni. I have the pleasure of bringing Pankaj on board. And Opkey, as you all may know, is part of the entire SST, Smart Software Testing Solutions, at the moment, and they have a no-code automation tool that they have perfected, and they're currently going to market with that and helping customers solve their problems. Joining him also is Shashank Naik, who is partner at KPMG. I think Shashank is based out of US, so he would probably be sharing the same time zone as I would be. So welcome on board, Shashank and Pankaj.
Pradeep.
Hi, Pankaj. Long time,
Pradeep, good to see you after a long time.
Absolutely. And Shashank, we both share the same time zone. So you're in DC, I'm in Boston. Cheers to the morning coffee with you. So certainly we have.
Yeah.
Okay. So brilliant. Great to have you both online. And we would love to hear your views on, how we can ensure that the future of testing changes with the no-code automation experiment that you're going with. Really love to hear your thoughts. So I don't want to take much of the steam away. I'll have a lot more questions at the end of it. But over to you. Fire away.
Sure. Thank you. There you go. Shashank, can you see the slides?
Yeah, I can see it. Can you hear me?
Good to have you here, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Pradeep, thank you so very much for that kind introduction. I'll maybe quickly introduce Shashank. We have the pleasure of his company today. Shashank is, one of the partners of KPMG, one of the stalwarts. We have had long discussions on where this industry, the entire testing industry, is headed, and we share a common mind space in terms of, how we can make the entire enterprise testing easier. And that's why we thought we'll do this presentation together. And the whole idea is to maybe speak from our experience as to why the continuous testing, specifically for ERP transformations, is not a myth anymore. We have heard about it for a long time now, but I think it's time now that the enterprises have started putting it into practice, and we are going to discuss some of the challenges they face, what's the best way going about it. So that's what this presentation is going to be all about. We have already introduced ourselves, so we can skip it. This is going to be the broad agenda. We are going to discuss, whether you really need the continuous testing for ERP applications, or is it just another fad that's going to be here for some time. How the continuous testing for ERP application is different or similar to the custom applications. How to make it work, and here we'll draw a lot from Shashank's real life experiences. And finally, how we at Opkey are helping our customers, achieve this elusive dream of continuous testing for ERP applications. A quick introduction to Opkey, the company, the product that I'm part of. So what we are doing at Opkey essentially is we are reimagining the way testing and test automation is being done for the packaged applications. We have categorized that broadly into ERP, but this includes the CRM applications, the HCM applications, the likes of SAP and Oracle. And this problem has existed for the last 20 years, since the time I started my career in 2002, right? And it's surprising that till date we have not found a perfect fit solution to test, cross application, cross business process kind of scenario. And that's what we are doing with Opkey. We are taking a different approach to solving this entire problem. We have about 250 plus customers globally. We are a team of 90, test geeks and nerds, as we like to call ourselves, across 3 different time zones. And most of the customers that we work with have been able to achieve about 10x or 15x kind of ROI in terms of their investment on their entire ERP automation. So I'll maybe kickstart the discussion. And the first point is: do you really need the continuous testing and the entire spiel of DevOps and continuous testing for package or enterprise applications? And to answer this question, we went to the industry and we went to 200 plus ERP managers, the app managers whose responsibility is to make sure that these enterprise applications are up and running and the business users are able to use it on a continuous and a seamless fashion. And we asked them some questions, right? The questions were focused more around, uh, how the business has changed, with this entire pandemic. I mean, how many changes were they pushing before versus how they are doing it now? What exactly is their typical automation coverage for their enterprise applications versus their custom applications? What keeps them up at night, typically? Uh, and by the way, the result of this survey is available on our website as well in form of a full detailed report. But here are some of the findings from that report. And these are stats that came not as a surprise, but it was it was pleasant to see it in line with the way industry is moving. So SAP managers, they talked about more transport requests, 47% more transport requests, which essentially is a term for change requests, going into the production across different environments, going into the system. Then, pre 2020 and post 2020. Oracle customers talked about more configurations being done, right, in order to make the business processes more agile. And the Salesforce admins, whom we call the app managers, they reported that close to 68 or 70% of customizations are now more than before, which means that essentially business is asking greater questions. Business demands more changes to be pushed into production, and it's much more than what it has been done before. Right? Shashank, a question to you, sir. Based on your experience, is this something consistent with what you are seeing in industry?
It is pretty much consistent, and thank you, Pankaj, for giving me this opportunity to be here with you guys today. So also there's an interesting trend going on, right? So like within the pandemic, we've seen many CIOs and CTOs essentially accelerating their digital transformations. And it's not about just, hey, if I'm a CIO or a CTO, my focus is going to be on SAP or my focus is going to be on Salesforce. It's about how do I have my front, middle, back, all of it together as part of the digital transformation. So a lot of clients that we are working are doing, Salesforce on the front end and Oracle on the back end, and they are not done serially, right? And that's where this need now has accentuated, where you just can't have manual testing and some sort of a scripted automation where you're doing some stuff because you just don't have time, right? It's all about how fast you can get out there, how the time to market has really sped up things, and that's where I think there's a lot of emphasis on bringing next generation automation platform, right? Because you have Selenium and you have scripted worlds, but it's not holding the water anymore, right? It's about how can you get no code, low code kind of automation platforms in there. And one of the stats that you're showing, it's about 72% defects are found in production, right? That's where I think there is a high time that for ERP implementation or SaaS implementations, you need to start thinking about how you would think for custom apps development, right? Where you are moving testing to the left and you're focusing more on testing at the start. You're implementing ERP through agile methods and finding these defects as early as possible.
Absolutely. It's interesting you mentioned this particular stats because this actually came as a surprise when we went to these managers, and what it manifests itself in in terms of hypercare cost or production support cost that typically shoots through the roof whenever you implement a new ERP software or you move to the cloud, right? So 72% of the defects that are caught in production, and when we went back and asked what exactly they feel is the reason, 58% of the managers, they said that the testing coverage is not enough for them, right? So which clearly shows that there is an increased pressure on them to release or push changes faster to the production, but they don't get enough time to test, because of which the defects are actually going into the production. And these are config defects. These are real-time defects, basically, right? So I think bottom line is that it's not a question of whether you need it or not. Continuous quality assurance is now actually becoming continuous business assurance, right? So continuous testing for your ERP implementation, for your migration project is a given now, right? Uh, Next logical question is, continuous testing for custom applications has been there for a long time, right? I mean, I would say it's fairly mature and it's reaching that level of maturity. But is it same as enterprise applications? If not, what exactly are the difference between how would you implement a continuous testing for custom app versus an enterprise app? Shashank, thoughts?
So that's a very important point that you made, right? It's no longer about quality. It's about how are you assuring your business, and we go in the marketplace, and I'm sure Pankaj, you must have seen your clients and others talking about, this entire thing about DevOps, right? So how does QA sit within that DevOps? How do you shift left and move testing towards left so that you can find as much defects as you can? And then it's not about just testing during the development, but it's about how do you also strengthen your right, which means when you go into production, how can you then continuously test, continuously monitor, so that you don't find those 72% defects that you found in production, right? So people have figured this out for custom apps, and primary reason they have figured it out for custom apps is because most of the custom development happens using agile modern delivery, right? So a lot of people are using concepts of agile, concepts of safe. They have matured, DevOps pipelines, and you have a plethora of tools out there wherein you essentially can achieve this continuous testing. And that's why I think I like the fact that you have this conversation today as title, rightfully so, that now can we get some of that into ERP and say that it's a myth no more? And why ERP has been traditionally difficult to achieve continuous testing is because it requires deep functional expertise. Right now in custom apps, you have developers who can take that ownership, take that scope, break it down into unit test cases and stories and features, and then develop it. But when it comes to ERP, it's about having deep functional expertise across procure to pay, record to report, and it's business processes. The second point is about legacy migrations. We work with a lot of our clients that have some of these ERP systems going as back as 20 years, right? When we started our career, they already had something in place, and they have been using it, putting band-aids on it, and making small customizations on it, and it just is a big financially and time-consuming effort to move from their legacy into the new world. So that kind of adds an complexity. The third part is complex. I think we lost Pankaj. Did we? Yeah. The third thing is the complex integrations. Now, like I mentioned, right? It's just not about Oracle. It's not about Salesforce. It's about how do you take large SaaS platforms and then connect them together to address those complex integrations. UI has changed, right? Meaning you see within Salesforce itself, they have gone from two major upgrades now. They have Lightning, right? So it's about using that complex UI that adds additional complexity to what you can automate, how much you can test. And on the right hand side, like you have, it's three-dimensional changes. Like you have customizations that are needed for your business, config changes that you have to do in a SaaS platform, and then the third and the most critical part that you essentially don't seem to control is the platform updates. In custom apps, you control what goes to production when, but when you have platform updates, and in this case, an example of mine is you have Salesforce and you have Oracle. Salesforce is going to have 4 quarterly releases. Oracle is going to have 4 quarterly releases. They may or may not align. So that increases a dimension for your testing that not many of our clients are thinking today, but they have to think, because otherwise, like I said, right, the speed to market will be reduced, but the customer experience is going to get impacted if they don't react to this platform updates that are going to happen. They'll start with quarterly, but they'll quickly go to monthly as well.
Absolutely. And what I've found is that because of these differences, most of the app managers or the QA managers, they find themselves into a completely alien territory, Shashank, because I mean, we don't know exactly how to now mitigate these challenges when it comes to implementing a good, robust, continuous testing infrastructure for ERP applications. So the next question obviously is how to make it work, Shashank, and what kind of automation you have seen typically for applications going ahead.
Yeah, and that's why I said, meaning, I think the only way, Pankaj, this could work is by teams now focusing on the next generation automation platform that allows them to quickly build these test cases, right? Automate it, build the infrastructure that is needed for this automation to run in a continuous fashion. And if you go to the next slide, I would like to highlight some of the points. Is a lot of people, again, there's a myth that says, hey, let me just increase my automation and I will do continuous testing. No, meaning, yes, automation is one part of it, but my question is, do you even know your ideal coverage, right? Because you might automate 400 test cases or 1000 test cases, but if they are only covering 15% of your landscape, then what good that automation is, or what good that continuous testing is, right? So we emphasize a lot on knowing your ideal coverage, where you can take a holistic look across your domain. Like, you go within Oracle, if you have finance, you have HCM. If you have SCM, then take a holistic view, understand your coverage, understand your business processes, your sub processes, your L1s, L2, L3s, and then make sure that you have included, right? Obviously, you can add some level of risk based prioritization to it, but know your ideal coverage, then focus on using a platform like Opkey that allows you to quickly, using low code, no code, and other features, to build that development, to build that automation right from the front. You're not essentially, again, in the ERP world, people say, hey, you know what? Let the business give requirements, let the developers go and customize, and then we'll manually test it. And then if time permits, we'll go and automate it. No, now the time has come where we have to slightly think this and move testing to the left, specifically for ERP applications. Is when the customizations are happening, use a platform, low code, no code platform, so that you can continuously start automating as you're configuring, right? The third aspect is monitor your changes continually, right? Again, we are going to break down the barriers where ERP was an year-long implementation, where 3 months were gone in documenting business processes, 4 months in development. No, it's about how can you take that business process and build it, using agile, and then how can you build automation while the configuration is going on, and then obviously building your entire pipeline, like we've been continuously saying, to have test execution at scale. How do you stand up all your VMs? How do you stand up, you can utilize technology developments. Now you could go to AWS, you could go to Azure, you could stand up your test environment and just pay as you go, right? You don't need your testing environments to be sitting there for 365 days of a year, right? You could use modern DevOps principles and apply those principles to ERP as well, so that while you build your automation, you're monitoring your changes continually. You can now start doing execution at scale, and get those elements of continuous testing in ERP.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I think a very, very important point. I think I would say these four form the pillar of a successful continuous testing strategy for any ERP out there, right? So, so I think when it comes to the test automation here, what I've seen, Shashank, is that if we translate what you said in terms of what exactly you need in your test automation tool or platform, and we talk transactional over here, right? I would say three key capabilities have to exist in an automation tool, to support this continuous testing paradigm for ERP applications. A, your tests have to be self-configuring, and what I mean by self-configuring is there are a lot of changes when it comes to a ERP application that happens at the configuration level, or at the metadata level. So if your ERP tool or ERP framework, test automation framework, doesn't support incorporating those configuration changes as it happen in a real-time basis, you just cannot have a sustained automation initiative going on. You need to bring those changes, right? I think second very, very important aspect that I see any automation tool that caters to ERP to have is this impact analysis concept, right? I mean, it has been in the realm of dreams with people doing it for one tool or the other tool. I mean, there are folks in the market who are doing it. But what we really need over here is for automation to be very tightly integrated with the impact analysis and the change management tool. So, for example, what's changing in Oracle ecosystem, understand its impact on what's happening in Salesforce, and then give you the right insights around it. That's key to a successful ERP implementation. And finally, there has to be some degree of self-heal because changes are so fast, you don't get time to maintain your test. And that's where most of the ERP automation initiatives, they fail. They are not able to keep pace with the changes which are happening, right? And that's why our automation platform has to have it.
And one thing that's why I like about Opkey, and I even coined the word as next generation automation platform is the platform you guys have built or the features that you've exposed essentially allow practitioners like us and our clients to essentially again challenge the concept of that's why I keep stressing on the fact that continuous testing for ERP is no longer a myth now, because using this kind of platforms we now have ability to essentially quickly use the pre-built accelerators, which are self-configuring test. When Oracle releases a build, we know ahead of time what Oracle is going to change or what Salesforce is going to change and how it's going to potentially impact my business by having that coverage map of continuously figuring out, okay, what's changing in Oracle, how can it impact my Salesforce flows and whatnot, right? And then the third part is the self-healing test. It's about we moving the envelope to the left, truly getting into that continuous testing by then working with our development team, and as and how they add the objects. Now I don't have to sit and figure out what has changed, why my scripts are breaking. We can then utilize some of the features like self-healing, where we are putting the onus on the platform to go and identify what has changed, where it has changed, what potential impact it could have for my test cases, and then self-heal so that I'm not spending my valuable time going figuring this thing out. I can use my hours to do something that is more relevant to the program success.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Shan. That makes sense. I think with that, maybe I'll just take a couple of minutes. I don't want to bore the audience on on how the product works, and I don't want it to be a salesy kind of presentation. But it's important to show that we walk the talk in terms of how we have implemented these features. And for everyone here, my colleague Dimpy gave a beautiful product demo yesterday. I urge everyone to go and watch it. It's on STC website. It's also available on our website. But some of the things that we have done over here, and I'll skip through some the slides. A very important concept that is integral to Opkey, and that is one of the secret sauce, is the concept of discovery, right? I mean, for example, Shashank had this important point about know your ideal coverage. How do you know what coverage is good for you? Whether it's 400 test cases, whether it's 750 test cases, I mean, we don't know, right? And most of the time, it's a guesswork. Opkey has taken the guesswork out of equation. What we do is we use the principles of process mining and configuration mining, and we combine it together to look at your environment, look at the logs, look at your configurations, and tell you exactly what you are testing today. You can point it to your staging environment, you can point it to your soaks or a sandbox environment, and Opkey comes up with this beautiful graph that tells you exactly these are your coverage right now. It also tells you what kind of gap exists into the system, right? So it tells that there are 481 scenarios that exist today, but we suggest another 285 scenarios to be automated. Not only that, with our library of 20,000 pre-built test cases, we apply those custom configurations that you have done on your environment, and we bring it, which effectively means that 90 to 95% of your test coverage is done for you in days, right? And that's the power, right? You don't have to spend months in building those libraries and stuff like that. So a specific test library which is customized to you is prepared by the tool in a matter of days, right? Now, next important point was about impact. How do you analyze the impact? And that's where we have done some good work in working with partners like KPMG, understanding how this change mechanism happened. Opkey can exactly pinpoint to the field level, to the form level, to the business process level, what has changed. So the screenshot might not be coming out very well, but what it shows over here is, in the instance, two of the fields have been removed and two new fields have been added, right? So it gives you detail up to that level. Not only that, it tells you what are the test cases that you need to run to mitigate the risks introduced by these. So what you are doing now is, with every change you do, you know exactly what's the risk, you understand the impact of that change, and you are ready to test it, on a continuous basis, right? And then to Shashank's final point about scaling it, putting it in AWS, we have this concept of our own test lab on cloud, which we are doing with our other product called pCloudy. And it allows you to scale your test, to the extent where one of our customer is running, 1,000 tests every hour for every configuration change they are doing in their migration environment. So, in effect, discovery, the configuration out of the box, the impact analysis, and scaling. That's how Opkey is changing the game of ERP testing and test transformation, so to say. Right. Right. Finally, to summarize, Shashank, I think three very, very important points that came out. We need continuous ERP testing, not only for the heck of testing or for just implementing a cool DevOps thing. We needed to de-risk the business transformation, right? Because it's all about business assurance. We also need a different approach to continuous testing for ERP applications than what we have seen for the custom applications, right? And finally, a good specialized ERP tool that can incorporate some of the principles we talked about, like Opkey, can help you accelerate that entire transformation, your journey to the cloud, be it SAP ECC to S4HANA migration or stuff like that. Any parting thought from your side, Shashank? Shashank, you are on mute, I think.
I think just to add to what you said to all our listeners, meaning what we're trying to say here is, time has come for us as a collective QA community to acknowledge the challenges that are in front of us, to also acknowledge the availability of platforms like Opkey, and then to use those platforms to essentially change fundamentally how we would test a SaaS application or a ERP application, and then do the same kind of rigor as it comes to continuous testing as we would do normally for a cloud native or a modern custom app that we will be building. So I would just again try to reiterate that point, Pankaj.
Thank you so very much, Shashank. Pradeep, over to you, man.
Fantastic. Yep. Great. No, I like the whole conversation style of discussing an issue. I think that's a fantastic format. And I'm sure, our audience also enjoyed, you both discussing about what is the challenge and how the challenge is being addressed, both from a practitioner perspective as well as from a producer perspective. So it's a very lovely talk. I really thoroughly enjoyed. I have some questions though, as always. My job is to keep asking questions, and I really enjoy that part of my job. Okay. So first question I have for you is, the no-code automation revolution is kind of happening across, right? There are many tools competing for that space. There are many organizations talking about implementing no-code solutions. It is an imperative that's completely understood. However, the question still remains as to how much of it will be a reality, right? And how close can it become to a part of our daily life, right? Because again, there is a huge cultural shift, of telling organizations saying now your business users can do this. You really do not need an external team member, so to speak. Not necessarily an outsourced situation, but not a specialized skill like programming is required, right? And I'm sure there is a resistance that you find. So, in your experience, what has been the biggest challenge, when you go to customers and show them, hey, life is going to be completely automated, the machines are taking over, and what was your terminator moment, as I would call it, right? Like in a way they come back and say machines are not going to take over, right? What's been that moment, and how did you come to that?
I can take first stab at it, Shashank, and would love to hear your thoughts as well. But what we have seen, Pradeep, is that there is a genuine problem across the board, right? I mean, if we talk about 4 years, ago, this entire concept of automation taking away jobs and stuff like that, it was real, right? I mean, that threat was real. Now, when we are going to the business users or going to the enterprises like Pfizer, for example, or a lot of other customers like Northwell, you know, we are finding that we don't have to convince a business user on the concept of automation, because they are into a problem, man. I mean, they are not used to the new realm of continuous updates coming to cloud, right? Look at the Oracle world or SAP world. I mean, they used to apply update once every year or once every couple of years. Now we are talking about update every month or every quarter. So they realize they have a problem, and the only way they can solve this problem is through test automation. So the question has now turned on its head now. I mean, we have reached that level of maturity where the business users come and ask, hey, automation is a given, right? No code is given. But is no code enough for us when it comes to ERP, right? Is no code all we need, or is there something beyond it? I mean, and that's where I think the conversation is now evolving as we move.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think, Pradeep, I think to your question, the first thing our clients would react is this, it's too good to be true, right? That kind of thing. But when we show them the features like auto discovery, like Pankaj mentioned, right? A lot of people say that, hey, no, I have a lot of coverage. But when we use features like auto discovery that goes and looks at the configuration, looks at what has been executed, and shows them a potential coverage map of where you have coverage and where you could potentially increase your coverage, that kind of opens their eyes. And now they're embracing the fact that, look, okay, my QA team has been helping me, but you know what? I can now use tools like Opkey now to increase my coverage and then get ready for this challenge that the SaaS providers are going to give me by pushing this builds from quarterly to even monthly.
True. The follow-on question that I have is, again, most of these have been like the process mining or the process discovery or mapping the existing process through a lot of these tools have largely limited themselves to the functional aspects of a system, right? And that's a large part, I'm not denying that as well. But for an e-commerce application, for people who are using it on the web, a lot of elements which are like security become an issue. A lot of elements like performance become an issue. So as part of the no code, where do you see the maturity? In the sense, like if I take functional aspects being, let's say, level 3 maturity or a necessity, and the level 5 being the ultimate no code evolution, do you see the tools evolving into that space and aligning with, let's say, like DevSecOps kind of life cycles and integrating with them in a thorough manner? And how do you see the maturity currently? Yeah.
I think that's what I can take a stab at it, Pradeep. I think fundamentally, I guess the SDLC concept for ERP also needs to change. It's just not about what QA wants to do, right? Unless you start taking this ERP and start implementing them in an agile fashion, this cultural shift has started to happen. And
True.
and having this kind of tools essentially puts QA in a driver's seat, where now they can work with the product owners, they can work with the development team and say, while you're doing configuration, I can essentially bring a tool, a low code no code tool like Opkey, and then continuously test with you, so that we together can make sure that we are hitting that acceptance criteria, and we are getting the output, right? I also see some questions out there, Pankaj, around for SAP implementation and other stuff, and then also for self-filling. See if you can take those as well.
Sure.
Yeah. So how does your platform work for SAP implementation? Does customer have to invest in additional licenses? How does this work? That's the first question, Pankaj. Yeah.
Right. So I think we are working with some of the largest enterprise out there during the couple of use cases in SAP. One is their ECC to HANA migration, S4 HANA migration, which is the hot opportunity as we call in the market, right, or a hot trend in the market. And what we have is we have these pre-built migration accelerators for SAP specifically that assess your readiness in terms of testing. It tells you exactly what are the scenarios that need to test based on your current processes. In terms of licenses, I mean, it's an additional license. Opkey is a different license, but we have partnered with a lot of these existing players like HP, like KPMG. So there are ways to get these functionality and licenses in a bundled fashion. And we can obviously reach you offline to discuss that, right?
Perfect. And the second question, and also an interesting one, is about the self-healing concept. There is a lot of talk about self-healing, as a concept, and self-healing tests. That's what people are talking about. Can you mention some of the approaches or a few approaches where this happens practically?
Sure. I mean, I would answer this question not from a tool perspective. I would answer this question from a person who's passionate about test automation, right? You're absolutely right in asking that self-healing has been around as a concept. And I would say why it hasn't really worked so far. I mean, there has been a lot of talks, a lot of conversations around it, is that it was applied in the wrong context. I mean, if you apply self-healing in the context of a custom application, where the locators are changing and stuff like that, the value you get out of the self-healing is limited, right? And and the aspect is that you are only limited to the UI layer. I think what industry has now found out is that this self-healing has to be applied as a concept throughout end-to-end orchestration there, right? So the way we do it, for example, or the way we approach it, and it's not the only way, is to actually look at the changes that happen at an API level, for instance, and how that impacts your UI or your metadata. Obviously, I would say our task is slightly easier than all the previous proponents of self-healing because of these ERP applications exposing metadata and stuff like that, right? So we look good because of those functionalities being exposed, but I think you have to look at self-heal in the right context. I still feel that we are, if I put it on the scale of that 3 to 5 you mentioned, Pradeep, I think as an industry, we are at a level 3, but eventually the technology exists to make it to a level 5 where any change you do can be healed in real time into the system. And I mean, I can just tell you that we are working a lot with KPMG to implement some of those concepts in some of the customer situations.
Brilliant. No, that's fantastic, because I think that's what is always the interest in this forum, right? In the sense, what are those innovations that are kind of propelling an ideation, propelling an thought, propelling a propagation, if I may say so, like making the world realize that, like, hey, it's not just a concept, but here are the organizations which actually implement, do this on a daily basis, and think about this on a regular basis. I think that's where the talk that you have given is fantastic, and really, really appreciate both you and Shashank. Shashank specifically, because it's like what 12:30 in the night, and you're still awake, which is great, And the first time I'm seeing someone from the US join at such an odd time, right? Normally, the team in India which stops at India.
Pankaj is also in US, and
very nice. Okay, I didn't know that.
This week he's in East Coast, so he's also in the same time zone as we are. So
I didn't know Pankaj. I thought you were joining in from Delhi, but anyways, so fantastic. For both of you to really come in and join, that's fantastic. And I'm happy to see you live, and happy that you're sharing the same pain as I am in terms of logging in at such a time in the night. Okay. So thanks a lot. I'll not keep you away from sleep, while it's my job to continue the show. I thank you all for that. And we'll certainly keep posting more questions post the session, Pankaj.
Sure.
And I will collect them in the forums. You'll certainly be receiving them to answer, So really appreciate,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Shashank.
Absolutely.
Thanks for